Hello everyone, this is Gene from NYC again. I'm back with another video. So I wanted to discuss something that's been making the rounds a bit recently. That according to the financial documentation and information disclosed by Feminist Frequency, because it is supposedly a non-profit organization, so they have to make public statements and show documentation of their money and where it's been going, or how it's being spent, that apparently they are broke. Anita Sarkeesian and Feminist Frequency are broke apparently. There's been articles written about it, there's been videos written about it. Apparently Anita has stopped taking a salary. Apparently two of her collaborators are now no longer receiving a salary. Apparently this happened in January of this year. So instead of talking about the particulars and the details of why Feminist Frequency is out of money, apparently according to their 2018 figures, they only had about 30 grand left after everything was said and done, which when you think about the hundreds of thousands of dollars that they were receiving at one point, is a very paltry sum, and no wonder that people are saying that they are broke. So what I wanted to do was to give my thoughts on why this happened, not really diving into the numbers or the details, but the broader, the bigger picture, I guess you could say, of why this has happened, why Anita and Feminist Frequency find themselves essentially broken without an audience, despite this being the era of the empowered woman and Me Too and Hollywood pushing it down our throats that we must support women. So here is my evaluation of the situation. Let's do a little bit of a backtracking, right? Anita's best years, visibility-wise, right, were probably 2014 to maybe 2016. But the absolute best was 2014 to 2015. This was the height of Gamergate. This was when the SJW versus anti-SJW frictions were at their absolute peak. The internet was on fire with Gamergate and with anti-SJWs going against SJWs. And this is where Anita, came to fame. This was the time when Anita was at the UN. This is the time when game companies were looking to her, were approaching her about her being involved in their projects. This is when she appeared on, I believe, the Colbert Report. I think Stephen Colbert was still doing that show at the time. He wasn't doing the Stephen Colbert show as of yet. I still think it was on cable, and it was the Colbert Report. So this was when she had her greatest visibility. Now the question is, how did she get this visibility? How did she become such a big name? Well, she became a big name because of a series of videos that she did called Tropes versus Women. And Tropes versus Women, while it was presented as an examination of tropes and women in video games, what it really was, and I say this as someone who has seen nearly every episode of it, it was misconstrued, it was twisted, and it was designed to incite the viewer, especially if they were a gamer, to anger and to outrage. And this is both how Anita came to fame and why she now cannot sustain her fame and why she can't turn it into anything grander or bigger. Anita's model is the outrage model, right? It is the adversarial model. And that, unless you know what you're doing, is by its very nature very difficult, if not impossible, to sustain for many reasons. First of all, minor interruption. So as I was saying, Feminist Frequency, or rather, Tropes versus Women, was a video series meant to incite the viewer to rage. You were either going to agree with Anita's position, or you were going to become incredibly angry. There were only two outcomes to it. And when your product is designed to incite people to anger, you're going to have a hard time because, believe it or not, people don't want to be angry all the time. Being angry mentally and physically is very draining, and people, generally speaking, I should say, do not want to spend their disposable income and their disposable time on something that is going to drain them. People generally want to engage in things that will restore them in some way, that will make them feel good, that will make them happy, right? You want to come out better than how you came in, right? You go to the movie theater, for example, and you walked in thinking, man, this film might be okay, and then you come out going, that film was awesome! That's the type of response people generally want to have with their entertainment. They want a positive experience. Being angry, even if it's a righteous anger, even if it's a justified anger, which Tropes versus Women was not. It did not incite any incense positive anger, right? But even if the anger or the reason you have to be angry is positive, it's still draining. And it's just not sustainable. It's not sustainable for the mind and the body. It's not healthy for the mind and the body. And as a business model, it is not sustainable, generally speaking. Another factor is that every fight, every competition, and I know this because I've been watching competitive sports or martial arts or wrestling all my life in one way or another. Every competition needs an opponent. Every competition needs two people or two teams going at each other. Anita doesn't have that anymore. Part of the reason why Anita was able to make her name was because her narrative, the narrative she spun was, I'm a woman in gaming. I'm just talking about the issues that women face in gaming, and I have these meanie boys, these meanie gamer boys attacking me for no reason. Well, the meanie gamer boys, right, which were at the time mainly Thunderfoot, Mr. Repsion, Amazing Atheist, and a few others, are gone now. They've moved on to other things. They don't concern themselves with her anymore, to my knowledge. I haven't seen a video from any of those channels or similar channels on Anita for years now. So she doesn't have the opponent anymore. She doesn't have these meanie gamer boys to fight against anymore or to paint in a negative light. There's also the fact that every fight, every rivalry, and again, this is something that I've learned from watching competition all my life, you need to keep the fights fresh. You need to keep the rivalry fresh. There needs to be new stories, new viewpoints, new outcomes, new rivalries. That hasn't happened either. Anita says and parrots the same thing that she was saying in 2014. She still blames every ill in the gaming industry on the presumed straight male player. People are tired of hearing that story. Even those who may actually agree with it, who may support Anita's views, are tired of her being a parrot and saying the same thing. The presumed straight male player, the presumed straight male player, the presumed straight male player, again and again and again. Even on Twitter, where she responded to Melanie Mack and her, in my opinion, very strong defense of Lara Croft and how Lara Croft actually was not sexualized and was not a product of the male gaze, Anita still said, well, she was sexualized, and she didn't have to be sexualized, and we all know that she was sexualized for the male gaze. She's making the same argument that she made 5 years ago and 4 years ago. She hasn't changed. Nothing about Anita has changed. Her arguments are the same. Her lies, in my estimation, I believe she's a liar, have stayed the same. The rivalry isn't fresh anymore. And you need a strong rivalry. You need opponents to go up against, and you need a strong rivalry to keep people interested. This is why wrestling promoters and boxing promoters and sports writers and sports media are always, talking and saying crazy things and coming up with storylines, real or imagined, because they know that they have to keep people engaged. If you hear the same thing over and over and over again, you just get tired of it. If there's nothing new, there's nothing different, what's the point of tuning in? So there's that. There's also the fact that there are so many things to be concerned about and to be outraged at and to basically be distracted by. The outrage market, I would say, is a lot more crowded than it was when Anita first was a big name back in 2014 and 2015, right? In those days, and it wasn't all that long ago, but it really has, been 4 to 5 years now. And 4 to 5 years ago, you didn't have things like Me Too. You didn't have these superhero movies coming out trying to force you to like the female heroine. These conversations about women in media and women in entertainment were not as prevalent back then as they are now. And that's part of the reason why Anita was able to have an audience. She kind of filled a niche, right? It's 4 or 5 years later, that niche is oversaturated now. We're now in Me Too. People are hyper aware and hypersensitive of how women are being treated in the movies and media and tech in general. How they're being treated online. It's much more of a talking point and a conversation starter and a fight starter than it was in 2015. So with all these other things around, all these other controversies to be interested in and upset about, who has time to be angry at Anita anymore? Right, so for these reasons, well, actually, there's one more reason I should list. It actually just came to me. There's also the fact that in 2016 and 2017, Anita made some missteps. Anita made some oopsies that really hurt her image, especially her image of being, an oppressed female gamer. The first one was at VidCon, I think in 2016, when she called Sargon of Akkad a garbage human and she verbally attacked him. Part of her narrative that got her all the media exposure she had was that she was scared and she was receiving death threats and all this other stuff, right? She played the damsel in distress. She may have criticisms of the damsel in distress trope, but she has no problem playing the role when it suits her. And she hurt this narrative that she's a damsel in distress that has to be rescued when she came out and very assertively verbally assaulted, in my estimation, Sargon of Akkad, calling him a garbage human and all these other names. Her whole narrative had been I live in fear. Yet here she is attacking someone who said nothing to her. I don't think Anita was ever on Sargon's radar, really. He maybe did a few videos about her, but she was never, or rather she was never someone to my knowledge that he really dealt with or had an interest in, right? Sargon's not known, for example, for his gaming content, at least not to me. And I think it came out later that apparently she mistook Sargon for Thunderfoot. How you confuse the two, I don't know, considering that last time I saw Thunderfoot, he was tall and skinny and long-haired, and Sargon is the opposite of all that. We'll just say that. But still, she confidently verbally assaulted Sargon, and this wrecked her narrative of living in fear and being attacked. She attacked him, not the other way around. Then I think it was another convention, perhaps VidCon the next year, where she was on a panel with Boogie. I never remember the last four numbers of his screen name, but we all know who he is, right? The bearded guy, the very heavy-set man. He has an anxiety disorder, and he's very open about that guy. We all know who Boogie is, I think. I don't mean Boogie Cousins on the Golden State Warriors. Not that Boogie. Not DeMarcus Cousins. The internet Boogie. But anyway, it came out, and he even stated it, that she had been very rude to him and had yelled at him after he unintentionally, I guess, spoke too long. I'm trying to remember it. I believe he spoke a little too long at the closing of their panel, and he was talking about his experiences and whatnot, and apparently she sort of read him the riot act backstage, and then he spoke out publicly about it. So now you have her again acting as the abuser in this situation. And people especially got upset with her about that because Boogie is sort of the internet's child, right, in a sense. People get very defensive and protective of him because of his very self-admitted and very open issues with interacting with people and having crippling anxiety and whatnot. So knowing all this, people became very defensive and very defensive of Boogie and very upset at Anita in response. So she had these two incidents within, I think it was 2016 and 2017, which really hurt her brand and hurt her image as this, oppressed woman living in fear, right? She had broken the illusion that she was some sort of saint or some sort of oppressed minority. She now showed that she could be just as mean and just as cruel as the very people she was accusing of being mean and cruel toward her. So when you take all these things into account, it's not surprising, at least not to me, it is not surprising that Feminist Frequency and Anita Sarkeesian in particular have fallen the way that they have. That they're now not just out of money, effectively, but also, and this is the big part, out of an audience. They no longer have any attention. And attention, more than money, is what they need right now, because if they were to get attention again, they would no doubt get money again. But her opponents have walked away. The people who disagree with her have walked away. So as I was saying, Anita has lost her opponents. She's lost the people who dislike her. She's lost the people who do like her and do agree with her. She's lost her audience. Her audience and the attention that she garnered was always the lifeblood of her product, whether it be Tropes versus Women or Feminist Frequency. And she's lost all that attention. She's lost all those eyeballs. People are not interested anymore for the most part. And that is why now you see her on Twitter doing things like offering her consulting services to CD Projekt Red. and still even in that trying to, sort of drag them and insult them. The Anita model, the outrage model, the adversarial model is not sustainable. Entertainers know this, which is why, generally speaking, they don't insult their entire audience. They may insult a portion of their audience that they may, for example, disagree with politically, because it's now in vogue to disagree with certain political parties and bash people. They're acceptable targets, right? Trump supporters, Republicans, they're acceptable targets now. But very few celebrities are brazen enough or crazy enough to insult their entire audience, because celebrities, entertainers know that if they make the audience angry, that the audience sooner or later will walk away. They know that, generally speaking, yes, they have to keep their audience engaged, but they have to keep them positively engaged. They have to keep them interested, which is why celebrities are always talking about their next movie, their next interview, their next album, so on and so on and so forth. They're always promoting what's up next. Generally speaking, they are not insulting their audience, and they're not rehashing the old stuff over and over and over again. Anita has not learned these lessons from marketing and media in Hollywood. She relied on the old bitterness of Gamergate and the anti-SJW and SJW wars to still be sustaining her all these years later. She never thought to convert her model to something that was more positive and therefore more sustainable. She relied on anger. And not only has she relied on anger, she has relied on old anger. She's touting a narrative that even those who believe it are tired of hearing. And basically, when you play on old issues, old hurts, old fights, you lose your audience. No one's interested anymore. So, given all this, I'm not surprised that Feminist Frequency is hurting financially. I'm not surprised that Anita has stopped making videos and she stopped taking a salary, and the other people involved apparently are now on a voluntary basis and are not taking a salary. And now it makes a lot more sense as to why she was promoting her consulting services to CD Projekt Red. What I do hope that Anita and those involved with her learn from this is that you cannot live on outrage. You cannot live on old outrage. Hopefully they will learn to create a more positive product, something people will want to engage with over and over and over again. Something that will draw people in through positive, honest means, as opposed to manufactured controversy. I'm hoping that they'll learn from this and start producing content that is not insulting, that is not mean and hurtful and just incites people to rage. Because rage is indeed a fire. It burns, and it burns hot. But without oxygen, it goes out. If you don't have that oxygen to feed it, the fire's gone. So hopefully they will learn from this and do better. They probably won't, but hey, a girl can dream. A girl from New York City can dream. So that's it. That's the video. I hope that you're having a good weekend. I hope you have a good week, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.